So if this is your first time coming to one of these webinars, welcome. If you're a repeat attendee, definitely thank you for your continued patronage. We're going to be running through what's new in 12.2, which is a pretty big release for us, actually. This is going to represent, as you'll see, a pretty massive set of changes to the speech tuner tool. The tuner is one of our most popular products, definitely one of the things that tends to impress people the most, and we've put a lot of time and thought into how we can make it even better and more user-friendly. We'll also talk about a few other changes that are in there, so we'll go through focusing on anything that's changed in 12.2, so if you're upgrading from 12.1, you kind of know what to expect. Not a ton of major changes outside of the tuner, that's the big focus this time, but we will cover the other kind of small things as well. And actually, instead of just watching a PowerPoint presentation this time, you'll get to actually see me do sort of a live tuner demo, show you guys a hands-on look at some of the changes. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask them. We'll have time for Q&A as well. And of course, you're always welcome to follow up with a phone call or an email, and we'll be happy to talk to you that way. So we'll assume that you've got some familiarity with the LumenVox speech software. This is a somewhat technical presentation, though this time it's actually a little bit less technical than it usually is, since we'll be talking about fewer changes to config files and API settings, that kind of stuff, and more kind of looking at the tuner, which tends to be a fairly user-friendly tool, since that's sort of its purpose. But we will be focusing on changes between 12.2 and 12.1. So if you've never seen LumenVox, and I know some people come to these webinars just because they're interested in what we have, I guess go ahead and try and follow along, but we will assume you've got some familiarity with our software. We release important upgrades approximately 2 to 4 times per year. This is the third release in the 12.x series. We had 12.0, 12.1, and now 12.2. This release, I think, took a little bit longer than normal just because it's, as you'll see, a pretty massive set of changes to the tuner. And in fact, some of the stuff you guys probably won't see is behind the scenes. We're doing some really complicated things that when you see the GUI, you think, oh, that's really easy. But in reality, getting to that point was fairly difficult. So you may or may not appreciate all the complexity that we've put into this one, but there's a lot going on. And as always, you can click out this link. I'll be sending out copies of this presentation to everyone afterwards. You can click this link, lumenvox.com/knowledgebase, and get full release notes. Important to note, by the way, that the LumenVox 12.2 is currently available, so you can go ahead and go download it right now if you already haven't. This is all live. I'm not talking about future stuff. This is, as Apple might say, go get this product right today, right now. And if you go to the knowledge base, there's instructions on exactly how to download it and install it. Also, if you'd like, please feel free to interrupt me with questions. So everyone's muted in this webinar, but there is a questions panel as part of the GoToWebinar software. So just go ahead and drop a question in there if you'd like. You can also just, I think, put it in chat, but it's better to use a little question panel that way I'll see them and I can respond to them. So you can just actually feel free to ask those as I'm talking, and I'll try to answer them as I have time. Anything I can't get to, we'll talk about in a Q&A session at the end. And then, of course, as I said before, feel free to contact us. You can always email us, support@lumenvox.com, or give us a phone call. We'll be happy to talk to you. All right, we're going to go through the new features here in 12.2. One of the changes that we're going to see is the tuner is now keeping track of confidence thresholds. So this actually has some ramifications for other users. If you're a media server user, that is, you're using LumenVox via MRCP, so probably you have some sort of voice platform. So if, for instance, you're using Avaya or Voxeo or Genesis or Asterisk, all these platforms that use MRCP to talk to us, no changes are going to be required for you. When you send over the confidence threshold as part of MRCP, the media server will now store the confidence threshold in the utterance file that we use for tuning. So if you're not familiar with the tuning process, basically every time you do a speech recognition or a TTS synthesis, we can write out a little binary file. We call it a glossary or an utterance file that includes a bunch of data, including audio and grammars and all kinds of stuff that we can use for tuning. One of the things we're now putting in there is going to be an actual confidence threshold value. So that's going to basically be used in the tuner to try to do some things. We'll know, okay, the confidence threshold for this dialogue state was 50%. We think that a better confidence threshold is 70% or 30% or whatever, and the tuner can do some calculations around that. What this does mean is if you're an API user, you need to go ahead and tell us the confidence threshold if you want to make use of this feature. So there's a new property you can set using the setPropertyEx function in our API called PropEx confidence threshold, and you'll just basically set it to an integer between 0 and 1,000 to tell us what your confidence threshold is, and then we'll store it. You don't have to do this, as optional, but it does let you get some new features. And again, most of the users who are media server users, you won't have to do anything. This is just happening automatically. The 12.2 media server saves this stuff. We've also added some new changes to the LumenVox manager that will go ahead and clean up log files for you. So previously we would basically delete some log files as they got too big. We just kind of roll them. But you could also turn on this extended logging mode, which would just basically write new logs out every day into new folders. So if you were in extended logging mode, you are really probably not going to get things cleaned up. And we had some scripts that you could use to go ahead and clean them up yourself. But now we're going to go ahead and just say we've got this for you all ready to go, and it'll clean things up automatically for you. So this is if you're using the LumenVox manager. There's a new entry in the manager.conf file, the configuration file for the manager, called log file max age, and you can set it between 0, which is disabled, and that's the default. So if you have it set to 0, we'll never clean it up. If you have it set to 15, we'll clean it up every 15 days, and then sort of 30 is the maximum. There's also another setting, because the manager saves off what we call these resource log files. These are used to display the graphs that show you like system performance over time and all that kind of stuff. So if you're familiar with the dashboard graphing, it'll basically clean up those log files separately. So you could save performance data for longer than you save your just normal text logs if you want. So kind of a nice feature for people who have busy systems with lots of logs and want them to get cleaned up automatically. And then the speech tuner itself has, I'm going to talk about several different aspects of it, and there's a lot of little things that have changed too. Those are all pretty well documented throughout the knowledge base. There's a whole bunch of more speech tuner pages now, by the way. If you go take a look at that, that's all live. We're going to kind of focus on 3 major changes to it, because these are probably the most interesting things. The first of which is that we now have a menu filtering system. We've also added a set of wizards that will help you do tuning, kind of walk you through finding some problems, and also some new grammar editor features to talk about. Actually, several new modules to the grammar editor, as well as the ability to generate multiple parses. So a pretty major issue people have when they're doing tuning, and this especially applies to people who are new at tuning. So I think in general, most of these changes we've made are aimed at newer tuners. So, well, people who are newer at doing tuning. If you're very, very experienced and you know how to do tuning and you've done it a bunch, you'll find some nice sort of quality of life features. But most of what we've done is try to make it a little bit easier for new people to get up to speed. But this is actually a feature that should help everybody, and it's pretty innovative, and we're pretty proud of it. One of the major problems people have when tuning is trying to focus on the right stuff. So right now, when you load a bunch of data into the tuner, you basically just get a glob of data that says, oh, here's a bunch of interactions. I have 5,000 speech recognition events. Okay, have fun. So what we're doing now is actually automatically calculating which different menus were used in the application. And the way that we're doing this is kind of interesting, because we don't really have the ability to know precisely what's going on the voice application side, right? If you're running a voice XML application on a voice XML interpreter, or you're running asterisk dial plan or whatever you're doing, our only connection to you is over MRCP in most cases. And in MRCP, the voice platform is not going to send us any information about the dialogue state. It just doesn't. All we get is, here's a list of grammars, here's some settings, do a recognition. So what we're doing is kind of backing into the menus based on the grammars that you're using. So we've decided that if you've got a particular set of grammars, then we'll assume that those correspond to a single menu. And then we can kind of use that to say, in the tuner, there's a drop-down where you can pick menus and say, I want to just focus on my name menu, or I just want to focus on my yes-no menu, or I just want to focus on my main menu, whatever. And that's going to be really useful for you to go ahead and pick and just sort the data that you want to focus on. We've also added a number of tuning wizards. And by the way, we're going to look at all this stuff live in the tuner, so I'm going to kind of fast over it now. So we'll take a look more depth at it in just a second. So the tuning wizards are really cool things that basically you say, hey, I think I have some problems, but maybe I'm not sure what they are. Can you take a look at the data and tell me what's going on? And so you can basically just pull it up, say, here's the menu I want to focus on, or I want to focus on everything. Here are the problems I'm potentially concerned about. Maybe I think there's too many no input events, or maybe I'm concerned that the confidence threshold isn't right, or accuracy isn't high enough, whatever. Can you tell me, is that a problem, first of all? And if it is, show me the data that's a potential problem. So that's what the wizards do. They're kind of a way to kind of alert you that there are problems, and then a way to filter and focus just on the data that has those potential issues. So again, these are sort of time savers and also very useful for people who are new at tuning and may not be as good at combing through a mess of data to find potential issues. So you can see here an example of the tuning wizard screen where it comes up and says, hey, look, we found these potential problems. Utterance accuracy is only 87%. Maybe we can improve that. We've got a high amount of out-of-grammar utterances, whatever. You can click on one of these, and we'll see exactly what it kind of does for you. We've also realized that one of the hardest parts in tuning is improving grammars. And even actually just for developing applications, too, so it's nice. Whether you've got an application that you're doing tuning on, or whether you're just sort of testing or building an app for the first time, the tuner's grammar editor is a really great and powerful piece of the tuner. It gives you the ability right now to go ahead and load up grammars, do validation to make sure that they are valid, they don't have syntax errors, to do parses to see if the user says this, what will the output be, what's my semantic interpretation going to be, all that kind of great stuff. And anyway, what we've done is decided, okay, we need to improve this grammar editor because grammars are hard to write, and it's a real pain point for a lot of our users. Again, especially the people who are a little bit newer to speech. They often have trouble figuring out where their grammar problems are. So we've added a number of features to the grammar editor to make it much more usable. And actually, these are really useful for advanced users as well. I mean, these are the kinds of things that I have been kind of asking for a while. So I'm very happy to see them there. Personally, as someone who does a lot of tuning, these will be really helpful for me in the future. So one of the features is you can now parse an input against multiple grammars at the same time, which is really cool because you can kind of check for collision. Does this input sentence, is it represented in multiple grammars, and if so, what happens, right? So that's a problem people often have. We can also now generate sentences randomly for you and show you examples of phrases that are in grammar. So you can see, oh, this sentence should not be in there. This is a nonsense phrase. I've got a problem. My grammar is too wide. I can go ahead and narrow it down. Also, a pronunciation checker that'll help you find words or names that have pronunciation issues. So a lot of times people say, I want to do some tuning, I want to do some phonetic spelling, but I don't know where to start. And here's a good place that'll help you. Also, we've added, along with menus, another concept to the tuner called grammar sets, which, as we'll see, it can let you track changes over time. So, with that said, let us get to the tuner demo because that is what is interesting. So, this is the 12.2 tuner. It looks a lot like the previous tuners with a couple of additions to it. I've already loaded up a set of data, so this is just sampled data from our call router. I think it's like just a day's worth, so it's not many. Just you see about 100 interactions. And so our call router is you say the name or department that you want to speak with, and then we may route you there, or if you have a lower middling confidence score, we'll ask you to confirm. So it's a pretty simple application, good for showing. As you can see, if you're familiar with the tuner, this looks very similar to the previous tuners. A couple of changes only. The most obvious one here is this, you saw this before, this grammar drop-down, or this menu drop-down. And what this says basically is I can focus on just a particular set of grammars. So in this case, imagine that I want to just tune cases where we ask people to say the name of the person or department they want to talk with. Well, in this case, the tuner's actually figured out that any menus that have just the name grammar active, or any interactions that just have the name grammar active, are one menu, and then the confirm menu is a different menu because that's where we use the yes/no grammar instead of the name grammar. And it can do this for sort of combinations of grammars as well. But if I click this here and choose grammar's name, right, so this is the name of this menu is the name menu, you'll see that we go from 97 to 84 interactions. So most of our interactions in the call router use the name menu, which makes sense. Most of the time we just ask you for the name and move on. We only confirm some of the time. And if I come here and look at the yes/no menu, well, in that case, it's just going to be 13 interactions, not a ton. So you'll see that most of the data is going to be in the name, which can be really nice. Like I may very well decide, hey, look, yes/no coverage is good. Not much to tune there, right? We don't usually tune yes/no menus very much. So I want to just focus on names. So I can just go ahead and click this, and you'll see here it applies everywhere. So in the transcriber, I would just see interactions to transcribe that use that menu. If I look at yes/no, obviously there's much, there's far fewer. And again, look at the accuracy for yes/no, right? All correct except for a couple out of grammars. So, you generally don't spend a ton of time tuning yes/no grammars. So we can just easily filter those out and not use them anymore, which is a really nice feature. We can just focus on, the main menu that we care about and not worry too much about the confirmation menu. There's also this concept here of grammar sets. So a grammar set is basically a way to track changes to a grammar over time. So imagine that my name menu changes, right? So on Monday, someone joins in the company, we add them to the grammar. We use that grammar all week. On Friday, it's somebody's last day, so we remove them from the directory and remove them from the grammar. That's two different versions of the grammar over the course of a week, right? The one on Monday and the one on Friday. But they both correspond to the same menu. And we know that because the URI is the same and some other, we use a couple other things to kind of figure out if this grammar is really the same as the previous ones. And in that case, we might have multiple grammar sets. So I've only got 1 day's worth of data, so I only have a single grammar set here. But you might very well have a menu that has multiple grammar sets, which are basically evolutions of the grammars in that menu over time. So you can kind of, if you want to, focus on just a particular grammar and see, it can be useful, like how did this grammar change over time? How did accuracy change as we changed the grammar? That's available through this grammar set dropdown. And you also have a couple of options. So you can, like, if you want to provide a name for this grammar set, like I want to call this one Monday grammar, so I can just kind of remember what it is. I can put it there and there now. It doesn't appear as grammar set 1, and now it has my name, so that I put in there. So it can be nice for kind of user-friendly type stuff. Otherwise, we got the kind of things that have already been in the tuner. Well, we've added this confidence histogram to the front page now. It didn't previously used to be here. There used to be kind of this call volume graph, but we really found that the confidence histogram was one of the most useful pieces of the tuner, so we really wanted to draw people's attention to it. We've also got, as I mentioned before, these tuning wizards. So the way you access them is to click this magic wand icon. The very first thing that will happen is it says, hey, look, you've got a filter because I've just chosen the name grammar. Do you want to just limit the analysis to the filtered interactions, or should we do analysis across all the data? So let's go ahead, let's take off the filter, and we'll just use the all the data. And so you're going to kind of get this main tuning wizard page. What this page is going to show you is a choice of 3 options. It'll also, by the way, give you a link to the Tuning Wizard knowledge base article. So we spent a lot of time documenting how these tuning wizards work and what you should do based on what they have to tell you. So I strongly recommend you read these things. They also, by the way, serve as sort of a nice introduction to tuning. So if you're new to tuning, reading through those will kind of walk you through the way that we think about speech tuning. As much as anything, speech tuning is a mindset rather than a list of steps to follow. And so we've tried really hard. We've worked a lot on these docs, tried really hard to distill that information, distill that mindset into a series of documents. So recommend reading those. You'll notice there's a lot of links throughout the Tuning Wizard to the knowledge base articles for that reason. But basically, you're fundamentally presented with a list of three options here. The top option is the one we're probably going to use the most. That's going to basically say, hey, look, take a look at all my data and tell me what my problems are, and then I'll pick what to do. If, however, there's a couple of more targeted changes, if, for instance, you know that you're only having a problem with one language, like American English works fine, but Mexican Spanish is failing, I don't know why, this will kind of help you figure out what's going on there, tell you where the acoustic model's loaded, was the language tag correctly declared, all that kind of stuff. It's basically just a pinpointed troubleshooter. The other thing is, if you have a particular grammar that doesn't work, it'll help you out here. So you say, hey, all my grammars work except for this grammar. What's going on? And so it'll basically tell you, are there any syntax errors? Is it invalid? Kind of give you some information about that grammar. So just had a question from the audience. Someone is asking, is a speech tuner licensed and does it run on Linux? The answer to the first question, yes, it does require a license. So the speech tuner we license on an annual basis. So you can talk to your account representative about the pricing for a seat of the speech tuner. It is included, so if you have a software development kit from LumenVox, we include a 1-year license with that. So if you've purchased an SDK in the last year, you would have access to use the tuner. Otherwise, it's pretty cheap. So talk to your sales rep. The value that it brings, like anytime I've done an ROI analysis for a customer who's considering buying the tuner, it's wildly positive. It pays for itself if you do a single tuning cycle. Just because it really does cut down tuning time by at least half. I mean, I actually think it kind of when I'm done tuning without the tuner versus tuning with the tuner, I'm like, it takes me 10% of the time. I mean, it's really, really useful. As for does it run on Linux, unfortunately, it does not. It's a Windows-only GUI application. It can, however, talk to speech servers and TTS servers that are running on Linux. So you can just set up like a single Windows VM or something and just use it for the tuner and have everything else still running on Linux. So that is possible. Anyway, most of the time what you're going to do is pick this top choice, analyze my data and report issues. And I'll take you to this page here called Select Issues to Analyze, which is basically asking you to tell it which things are important to you. So I've got this checkbox up here that lets me toggle between the different issues. So I can say don't select anything or select everything. And I'm going to say, hey, look, I'm worried about confidence tuning. I want to know if my thresholds are good. I'm worried about utterance accuracy. Yeah, pretty much everyone's always worried about utterance accuracy. I'm worried about out of grammar rates. I'm worried about out of coverage. I'm worried about no inputs or decode failures or slow decodes. And you can kind of just come into this menu by clicking Configure, and basically this is sort of an advanced option, but it is there. That you tell the tuner how important these things are to you. So to the left makes it more sensitive, so it says I care more about this thing. To the right says I care less about this thing. So if I didn't care at all about confidence tuning, like I know my confidence thresholds are good, I don't care about that, you could set confidence tuning all the way to the right. But on the other hand, maybe you care a lot about no input, right? Like, oh, if there's any no inputs, I want to know about that. Or maybe you say, oh, yeah, I don't really care about no inputs, and I don't really care about no grammars, but I really care about utterance error rates, about accuracy. So then tell me what's going on there. So you can see here the sort of number of calculated menus with a potential issue changes based on it. So confidence tuning has no issues right now, no way to improve confidence because we set this all the way to the right. We just hit reset defaults here. We'll get an idea of these are the kinds of things that the tuner says it thinks it might have a problem with or might be able to help improve us. And you can click on any of these things to get explanations of what these mean, and then click on these links to get more data about exactly what is a confidence threshold anyway, what's a confidence range, how do we use this crazy histogram thing. Again, a bunch of new documentation for the tuner. Anyway, so once I've said these are, I want to create every issue, just tell me what I've got going on. I click next. I can click a menu, so if I want to just focus on my name menu or my confirmation menu or on everything, I can do that. We'll just go and focus on our name menu. And basically it says, oh, the only thing that I see in the name menu really that's a potential problem is the percentage of out-of-coverage utterances. So out-of-coverage is actually a new thing that we've added to the 12.2 tuner. I'll show you guys that in a second. Basically, out-of-coverage is just it's our new name for total garbage utterances. And so I could click on this, and then it'll just kind of show me the percentage of out-of-coverage utterances to other types of utterances. I can click on this link to see some information about how to correct this, what to do about out-of-coverage utterances. Are your sensitivity settings correct? Are you having on particular menus versus other menus, etc. I can also, if I want to just hit this apply filter and exit button, it'll just show me all of my out-of-coverage utterances. So I can come in here to the transcriber and just listen to them, or in the tester and see information about them. Give my confidence histogram just about those things. Pretty useful to be able to get to just that data. Let me come back here. Come back into the tuning wizard, and let's say I really want to see about confidence tuning. What can I do for confidence tuning? I really want to know if there's any confidence threshold improvements that the tuner can make. Let's do that. So I'll go ahead and just choose this. And okay, so now it basically is telling me that we think we can have a 9% increase in, basically we're having a 9% increase in confidence error rate over what the tuner calculates the optimal threshold should be. So if we come into here, we get some numbers, and these are maybe a little bit hard to read. So you can click this expanded view to get a confidence histogram with some information. So it'll basically tell me that, hey, we think the value that you're using for most things is at 500, 50%, the default confidence threshold. But if you lower your confidence threshold to this calculated optimal range, this 300, it's a little smaller maybe, this sort of calculated 300, basically the tuner is saying that at 300, 30%, you get better accuracy than you get at 500%, so, or 500, 50%, right? So it'll kind of show you the changes in your correct accept, false rejects versus the what you're currently using. And you can, of course, explore the confidence histogram like you always could by clicking on these. We've also added some new features. I guess it's not in this one. If you come to the main confidence histogram over here, you kind of click on these ranges. There's some explanations about what they are, because sometimes people are a little bit confused. And again, a link to the confidence scoring knowledge base article. The other tuning wizards work kind of similarly. I don't think we're going to go through every single one of them, but you can explore them at your leisure, basically, if you want to see what are my out-of-grammar utterances, what can I do about those. Do I have any decode failures? So we don't have any decode failures here, but that would be a case where like just the recognition just did not work. So those are really important, right? So by default, we'll always warn you if we get those. But in general, it's a great way to kind of get highlighted to some information and to sort of pinpoint any potential problems you have. A very useful set of features. One thing I did want to mention was, do I have any filtering turned on? nope, no filtering, was this out of coverage option. So you'll see here we've got these OOC things marked now. And what happens is basically we've separated what was previously called out of grammar into two different categories. So there's out of grammar and out of coverage. Out of grammar is a case where the user attempted to interact with the system in a reasonable way. So you'll see here a case where somebody said operator, and we didn't have the word operator in our grammar. Well, operator is a totally valid thing to say, right? Like, say the name of the person you want to talk to, they say operator. All right, so that should probably be in the grammar. So we would transcribe what they said, and it would calculate that as out of grammar. And what we can do is when we when we do our out of grammar tuning, we take a look at all the out of grammar utterances and decide, should we add operator to our grammar? And we might say, yeah, that's a reasonable thing. Out of coverage is where people just don't say anything reasonable at all. So most of your out of coverage is what we used to mark as garbage. It would be somebody talking in the background to a friend of theirs, or a dog barking, or the radio playing. Right? These are not things you're ever going to add to your grammar. You can't add the radio playing to the grammar and expect the system to work. So it's really useful to be able to filter out of coverage out of your out of grammar. Because basically with out of coverage, you're never going to add that thing to the grammar. With out of grammar utterances, you might very well. So you want to be able to pull those apart, and you can. So now you'll see here we've got out of grammar and out of coverage calculated separately, and you can kind of take a look at them. There is, by the way, a setting here. If you're just like, I hate out of grammar, I hate out of coverage, I like the way it worked before, under the advanced tab here, you can go to treat OOC as OOG. If I click this, then magically my OOC utterances will vanish. You'll see now everything is out of grammar that was previously out of coverage. So that is an option if you really desperately want to do that. We've also changed the hotkey in the transcriber. So previously, if you hit escape while transcribing, it marks something as garbage. Hitting escape now marks something as out of coverage. So we're basically getting rid of that old garbage tag as a way to denote something as being garbage and going with OOC. And previously, garbage things showed us out of grammar, so that's why the reason for the change. And finally, the last kind of area I want to look at is the grammar editor, which has a lot of cool changes to it. So we'll edit our name grammar, and you see here it's a pretty straightforward GRXML grammar that's got a bunch of names and departments in it, about what you would expect. We've got a couple of cool new modules. The first one to take a look at is this pronunciation checker. So what this is going to do is tell you, show you a list of all the different individual words in the grammar and tell you how we're figuring out how it's pronounced. So there's sort of three different ways that LumenVox can calculate pronunciations. The first is we might have it in our dictionary, which means that we already have a phonetic transcription of that word as part of our acoustic model. So you don't have to do anything, we already know how that word's pronounced. So you'll see a lot of these names, like Brian, it's a common name, it's in our dictionary. The second way that we can figure out pronunciation is if we don't have it in our dictionary, we can auto-generate the pronunciation, meaning we've got a statistical pronunciation generator that looks at a whole big data set about how words in the language are pronounced and tries to guess based on statistical inference how a word it hasn't seen before is pronounced. And that works reasonably well. So you'll see here we have someone working for us named Adita Bilak. Bilak is not in the US English Dictionary, so it says that it's coming from auto-generation. And then the third way that we can get pronunciations is from custom lexicons. So as a developer, you can write a lexicon that says, here's exactly how a word is pronounced. And that will take precedence over the dictionary or auto-generation. And so here you'll see we do have a custom lexicon where Bilak is pronounced. Same thing with Adita, she's in the custom lexicon, and also the main dictionary. So we've defined it in both places. And so like a word like Janine, we don't have that in the lexicon, but the reason we don't have it in the lexicon is because the pronunciation generator figures it out. So if I have Janine clicked, I can click this phonetic spelling button, and it actually shows us how LumenVox is generating the pronunciation. So in this case, it's Janine, which is, I guess, good enough. And you can get the Sampa version as well if you want to see the Sampa Janine. Yep. So that's working reasonably well. A pretty nice little tool. You can just kind of come in here. If you ever have a case where you're like, oh, this name's not being recognized well, a good starting point is to see, is it in our dictionary? If not, do you have a lexicon for it? Or, you know, how does it think it's being pronounced, right? Like, all good and useful things to do. We've also got this random sentence generator, which I mentioned before, which will just go ahead and generate a list of 10 input sentences that are allowed by the grammar. So these are just basically randomly generated in-grammar sentences. So we've got Peter Lee, we've got David, we've got Peter Lee spelled a different way, Roger, Edward Miller, Jeffrey Hopper, Rajiv Reddy, Lisa, Rajiv. So we know, okay, this grammar allows us to say a first and a last name or just a first name, which is correct. And you can kind of generate more if you want to. Refresh the list, it'll just keep generating more random ones. And over here it'll show you the semantic interpretation associated with each one. So if I say sales department, the output is this XML string representing the extension and the full name. If I say Jeff, I get an extension of 143 and then the full name Jeff Hopper, so the TTS can read it out for use with confirmation. And the reason that this is really useful is it'll let you check grammar coverage. So a problem we've noticed people often have is that they attempt to basically write grammars that are too open-ended, and so they allow nonsense sentences in, right? Like imagine imagine if you wrote a digits grammar, right, and you were trying to collect a pin for 4 digits, but you allowed an infinite number of digits to be collected. Well, that'd be useful to know about. Like, oh, I only expect 4 digits, but this grammar allows 7-digit strings, right? Okay. Well, you could find that out easily through the random sentence generator, as opposed to deploying the grammar. It's not working. Why isn't it working? And going through and tuning it, you can kind of just do all this stuff in advance. And if you ever want to figure out what rules are allowing a word or a phrase to be recognized, you click this parse tree button, and it'll kind of like show you the exact rules that are being hit and the semantic interpretation that's being executed to produce that thing. So if I was like, oh, there's a problem with this Kevin Connolly rule, I can just come down to the Kevin Connolly rule and take a look at it. And finally, one of the things we've done is allow multiple grammar parsing, so we can parse multiple grammars at once. Previously, when you typed in a sentence here, like type in my name, Stephen, I would get, yep, Stephen Keller as a parse against the grammar that I currently have selected. But in real life, I might have multiple grammars active at once, right? My application might allow me to say a name, and also might allow me to say a global help command. Or maybe I've got just global commands in general. So I might have 2, 3, 4 grammars active at once. It's useful to test a given input to see if it hits multiple grammars. A very real problem we've seen in the past is that people have grammars active at the same time that allow multiple phrases, but they don't expect them to allow that. So like, if you've got the same phrase representing multiple grammars, you don't get like weird interpretations that you don't expect, and the application has trouble. And it looks like speech recognition is failing, but what's actually happening is just it's working correctly, just the application is not prepared to deal with responses back from multiple grammars. So this will let you kind of figure this out. So like, let's say I had my yes/no grammar and my name grammar active at the same time. So right now, here's the old way of doing things. I type the word yes in here. Yes is not valid in my name grammar. But what I can come over here is to this radio button selection and choose parse with all selected grammars. I can select my name and my yes/no grammar. And now I can type yes, and I get parse result 1 of 2. So against my name grammar, I don't get any parses. But against my yes/no grammar, I do get parses. And likewise, if I switch back to Stephen, I'll see, yep, that hits my name grammar, but does not hit my yes/no grammar. And generally speaking, what you're going to want is to only get parses from one grammar for any sentence. It's usually, there are some applications where it does make sense, but in most cases, you just want output from a single grammar at a time, just because that's the easiest thing to deal with. And if you've got collisions, that's something to deal with, and this is a good way to find out about that. All right, so that's the end of my prepared remarks about the tuner. Does anyone have any questions? You can feel free to answer it. Just ask it in the questions panel, or you can talk to us offline as well. It's pretty straightforward. All right. Well, I guess I did a fantastic job explaining everything. Everyone is completely without question. I answered them all preemptively, so that's good for me. Let's see here. Conclusion then. If you guys don't have any more questions, you can go ahead and send us an email or give us a phone call, or you can head over to the LumenVox Developer Network. You can check out our blog. We have a blog post there about 12.2. Oh, so I got some questions here. Someone's asking if we get a developer copy of the latest stuff. And I would love to give everything to everyone because I'm a technical guy, but the sales people, so you got to talk to your account representatives. They are the ones who actually control giving out licenses, which is a good thing because if it were just left to me, all the licenses would be given out for free and we'd go bankrupt, which is why I guess I'm not in sales, and people who make a living from commission are. And then, yep, I guess some other people have some comments. At least it seems like a great tool, so I'm glad that you guys like it. So check it out. Get in touch with us. We can hook you up. Again, full release notes. I would strongly recommend you check these out. This will have everything under the sun in it if my copy of Chrome wants to open. Yeah, this is really speedy today. There we go. So yeah, everything about 12.2.100 is in here, including some small things we didn't talk about, but most of the stuff is going to be tuner. Not a lot of other major changes to default behavior, so that's good. Obviously, if you're upgrading from a version older than 12.1, like let's say you had 10.5, I'd go through and check the release notes since then. So there have been some pretty big changes since, several years ago. Oh, and in order to upgrade to 12.2, you must have current software maintenance. So if you're not sure about that, give us a call. We can tell you whether or not you have it. The tuner license, essentially because it's not a perpetual license, it expires after a year. If you have a tuner license that's active, you have software maintenance for it. But if you want to upgrade your speech recognizer and your TTS and media server and all that other stuff, you would need software maintenance. Here's the support email address, support@lumenvox.com. I read that. I will respond if you write in and say, hey, Stephen, your webinar sucked. I got some questions or some feedback for you. Give you a piece of my mind. I will see that, so you can let me know that way. Or you can give us a call, 858-707-7700, and just say support, and one of us will pick up. All right, other than that, thank you, everybody, and I guess everyone have a great day.